Good evening. My name is Richard Lodge. I'm the editor of the Daily News of Newburyport, the sponsor of tonight's forum for the candidates for the 1st Essex District State Representative seat. This forum is being broadcast by NCN Hub, Newburyport's community cable access channel, as well as community access stations in Amesbury and Salisbury and on the web. And it will be repeated before the November 3rd election. I want to thank the City of Newburyport and Mayor Donna Holliday for allowing us to use the Senior Community Center where we are tonight. And I want to thank tonight's timekeeper, Theo Salemi, who is known to many people for his work with Joe DeBaez to produce the local Pulse Internet radio program. Our candidates are incumbent Republican State Representative James Kelcourse of Amesbury and Democrat Amber Hewett of Newburyport. Amber Hewett won the drawing earlier to determine who will go first, giving opening statements. And so she will go first, and then she will go last at the end of the forum tonight. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. And we'll start with Amber Hewett.
Great. Well, get started? All
Yep,
right.
2 minutes.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. Thank you, Representative. And thank you to everyone who is tuning in this evening. I have spent the past 7 years in state houses across New England, New York, and New Jersey advocating for climate action and clean energy policy. One of the first questions that advocates ask one another when we're about to bring forth a proposal or draft legislation is who will be our champions on the inside? Who will stand with us for this cause? We find those champions and they climb with us arm in arm until we cross the finish line. These are the legislators who make our air and water cleaner, our power more affordable, our energy systems more just. And these same leaders often turn right around and fight for education funding and accessible health care and investment in public transit. They're change makers, people who leave the laws of the Commonwealth a little better, or sometimes a lot better, because they were there, and not just the laws of Massachusetts. As someone with a regional job, I know that when impressive trailblazing legislation passes in one state, that leaders in other states are inspired by now knowing that it's possible and they get to work on their own version. Massachusetts has a rich history of leading the nation on important fronts: healthcare, public education, marriage equality. Well, we are in really trying times right now, with overlapping environmental, economic, public health, and social justice crises weighing down on us. We need to elect people who recognize the full scale of what it means to hold the pen as a lawmaker and what that responsibility is capable of. Now, I may not be describing the job as you interpret it based on our current representation. The job of state representative has 3 pillars: constituent services, bringing resources back to the district, and policy leadership. I believe that right now we have a state representative who gives a fair amount of attention to the first 2, but is woefully neglectful of the third. And my commitment to you is to do all 3.
Thank you, Ms. Hewitt. And next opening goes to Representative Kelcourse. 2 minutes.
Good evening and thank you, everyone. First, for the privilege and the opportunity and the honor of representing you in the State House. 6 years ago, you elected me to go to Beacon Hill to bring back resources for the 1st Essex District, and I've done that. I started out on the planning board back in 2008 in Amesbury. I was 5 years as a city councilor at large, and one of the things that inspired me actually to run for public office was a line item that I kept seeing in the budget, in the Amesbury budget. And it had to do with special education transportation costs. I asked then Thatcher Keyser, the mayor of Amesbury, why we were not getting reimbursed the expensive cost. And he says, well, it's not included in Chapter 70 and the redistribution back to the cities and towns from the state. So what I said is that when I get elected to the State House, I'm going to go there, and the first bill that I'm going to file is going to be an act relative to special education transportation costs. It took me 5 years, but guess what? We got that bill included in the Student Opportunity Act this past session. And that bill translates into hundreds of thousands of dollars for Amesbury, Newburyport, Salisbury, and the other 348 cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And one of the best things that happened to me when we did that is I was on the executive session of the Joint Education Committee in which I serve, and I had fellow colleague on the Education Committee lean over to me, shake my hand, and say, "Job well done." That was the Senate Chairman, Jason Lewis, a Democrat. And when I told you I would go to Beacon Hill, I told you I would make friends. And it's those friends and those relationships that have allowed us to bring back millions of dollars to the 1st Essex District. It's allowed us to pass legislation important to this district. When I pick up the telephone when hundreds of people have called us during this pandemic, I never ask them whether they voted for me, whether they were Republican or Democrat. I simply ask, how can I help you? And that's how we lead. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So the elephant in the room here is the absence of a large crowd. You normally have a room full of people for an event like this. And the pandemic has changed our lives in that way and countless other ways. But most importantly, in the past 2 weeks, 29 Essex County residents are reported by the state to have died from COVID-19. As of Wednesday night, more than 9,300 residents of our state have died from the coronavirus. On Tuesday, the governor, Republican Charlie Baker, called President Trump's words dismissing the dangers of COVID-19, quote, "incredibly irresponsible, it's massively contagious, and it will wreak havoc over many people if they become infected," unquote. First question to Amber Hewett. What did you think about what the governor said and what the president has said about COVID-19 this week? 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, I don't believe I've ever agreed with anything that this president has said, so it's no surprise to me that this was no exception. It's shameful, it's cruel. The numbers that you read off are just unimaginably horrific. And my heart goes out to everyone watching this who knows one of those numbers. I appreciate Governor Baker's comments, and I have appreciated much of his leadership in this space. I think it will probably be an elephant in the room for every topic this evening, but the lack of federal leadership on this front has a body count, and we can't minimize what this is doing and what it is continuing to do. The numbers are going up, and there's really no end in sight. So I commend the governor for speaking out against it. I can't imagine still being comfortable affiliating with the Republican Party with this man at the top, but I appreciate those who are willing to speak out and show some leadership at the state level so that those of us living in fear and losing loved ones can know that we have some leadership.
Okay, thank you. Representative Kelcourse, what did you think about when you heard what the governor said and what the president said?
Well, as many of you know, Governor Baker has been a dear friend of mine. He's been a great partner in the State House. He's helped bring back millions of dollars to Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury. I've had the privilege of serving with Governor Baker, and as long as he is the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, he knows I'll always have he'll always have my support. Governor Baker is a smart man. He's got a very difficult job, and what he's doing right now during these very challenging times is extremely difficult. And I think, and I know, based on my conversations with him, that he has the very best interests of everybody, not just here in Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury, but the entire Commonwealth, their best interests at heart. Governor Baker has enabled me to bring back not only resources to this district to help fight this awful disease and to protect the people of Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury, but one of the things I'm able to do is when places like Joe's Playland are shut down and they're suffering financially and they don't know how they're going to make their bills and keep their employees employed, I'm able to pick up the phone and talk to Charlie Baker and say, Governor, look, if we have casinos that are open and it's safe for them to do so, we're in a community with a very, very low COVID number, and we have a family who is working very hard to keep the surfaces clean, the same surfaces as there are in casinos in a much smaller place. Then we should allow them to be open. We should allow them to make a living, and we should allow them to employ people, because there's going to be far more devastating effects of those who are unemployed, who are unable to make ends meet, to feed their family, to pay their bills, to make their mortgage payments, and that's what really makes me nervous.
All right, thank you. Next question to you, Representative. We know the pandemic will continue over the next few months. Is there specific legislation that you'll propose to help restaurants and other small businesses in this district survive during the winter, traditionally the slowest economic time of the year? You have 2 minutes.
So one of the first pieces of legislation that I proposed during the pandemic was an act relative to credit rating protection, because restaurant people in other industries and employees of those industries are going to suffer greatly from this pandemic if their credit rating is affected. And that's going to carry on for a long time, probably much longer than the pandemic itself. 7 years if you have your credit report has a blemish on it, and 10 years if you have a bankruptcy. If you have financial hardship as a result of this pandemic, I want to make sure that your credit rating is protected so that you can recover a lot quicker. And that's going to help people in the restaurant industry. As many of you know, I've been a big advocate of small businesses because the small businesses provide jobs to the people here in our local economy. I've gone to Boston, I've lobbied on their behalf, I've spoken with the administration, I've worked with Secretary Sutter, the Health and Human Services Secretary, on making sure that we have minimal impact on these industries, so the financial burden isn't far greater than the one that the pandemic is obviously causing us to experience.
Okay, thank you. Same question to you, Amber Hewett. Is there specific legislation, if you were elected, that you would propose to help restaurants and other small businesses? And do you have any idea who you would work with to get something through, since you'd be a freshman in the legislature?
Yes, so I grew up in a Newburyport restaurant. My mom was the manager of David's Restaurant and then David's Tavern, which for the first 25 years of my life was my second home, the most constant place in my life. And I know intimately the world of running a restaurant, the narrow margins that come with it, the challenges of running in a seasonal climate. And I know the thrill of pulling off a busy night, as well as I know the fear that comes with a few slow ones. I cannot imagine enduring a few slow weeks or a few slow months, or having an outlook that brings with it yet another very challenging winter where it will be too cold to eat outside. So this absolutely needs to be a top priority, and it's one that's very close to my heart. The representative mentioned his bill related to credit ratings. I don't know anyone who was kept up at night by their credit rating throughout the early months of the coronavirus. People were scared about paying their employees, about how their PPP loan would work when they needed to be paying payroll, when they needed to be paying rent, but it mandated that they pay payroll. We applied short-term solutions to what turned out to be a long-term problem. I don't want to be overly critical. This was an absolutely unprecedented disaster, but 2020 hindsight shows us that what we have in place right now isn't working. Restaurants and small businesses have been able to dig themselves into a hole that they don't deserve to be in. So at the time that discussions were going on about credit ratings, there were also discussions on Beacon Hill going on about canceling rent and mortgage payments for a few months to just ease the burden and not let it be coupled with building up debt, and also to consider holding insurance companies accountable for some of the small business COVID-related losses. So those are the conversations that I would like to help pick up with the initial sponsors of those bills. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question to you, Ms. Hewitt. Food insecurity has been exacerbated by the pandemic, as we've all seen. As anybody who runs a food pantry or a kitchen that serves meals would tell you, there's much more demand. How would you use your power as a state legislator to initiate solutions so people wouldn't have to choose between food and healthcare, food and rent, food and childcare, food or heat? What would you do as a lawmaker?
Thank you. Well, thank you for this question. I have spent every single Friday, without exception, since early March, packing groceries at the Newbury Food Pantry, delivering them to residents all across the district and beyond. And it's, of course, one of many of our exceptional food pantries in the district. I know that there's been incredible work happening out of Pettingill and our neighbor's table, filling this gap. I'm grateful for the opportunity to feel like I'm pitching in, but when I think about being a lawmaker, I of course want to think more about preventing food insecurity than bringing funds to food pantries, as well as bringing funds to food pantries. But really, as a lawmaker, we have an opportunity to pass legislation that will lessen the actual problem. So I think that this is something that really comes down to the rising cost of living. I hope we get a little time to talk about affordable housing this evening. The cost of living in this community is rising out of reach of young people and seniors and service and care workers. And that increased cost, just the cost of life here, the cost of housing is just completely out of control. And that's what I hear from people who I talk to on the campaign trail who say, rent is the bill you have to pay. Utilities are the bills you have to pay, and whatever's left over has to cover the rest. And we absolutely need to start considering legislation that will address the soaring cost of living in this community. Things like considering rent stabilization, lifting the ban on rent stabilization that Massachusetts passed years ago, and really working with local leaders to incentivize and clear the way for development of more affordable housing units and smart growth.
Thank you. Representative Kelcourse, the same question on food insecurity. What would you do in the legislature? Use your power to initiate solutions so people wouldn't have to make those tough choices.
So the first thing that I did when I was elected to the legislature, because our neighbor's table is very near and dear to my heart. My wife has served on the board. I've been very involved in the organization. Members of my volunteer team are involved in the organization. And somebody very dear and close to me, the owner of Amesbury Industrial, has really paved the way in showing how we should be donative and take care of others by donating a great deal of money and a building so that our neighbor's table could create a new food pantry and move out of the basement of the church in Amesbury, where they were located for a long time. So my hat's off to Greg Jardis and the Jardis family for doing what they did and making that space possible. I've lobbied for $30,000 every year for a total of $150,000 to help our neighbor's table, to feed homeless veterans living in Newburyport, Salisbury, Amesbury, the greater Amesbury area. So that's a start. One of the other things that we continue to fight to do is to make sure that there are jobs available in this area. And that's the big focus during COVID-19. I can't tell you how heartbreaking it is to speak with literally hundreds of people who have just lost their jobs. On March 12th, I flew down to Washington, D.C. to end pollution in the Merrimack River. On Friday, March 13th, my schedule was clear because all my meetings were canceled. On March 15th, the governor shut down all business with the exception of those that were non-essential, that were essential. And on March 16th, our phone lines literally did not stop ringing. And that's one of the reasons why I put my cell phone out there for the public, so we could answer their questions, so that they had another number in which to get in touch with me and my legislative aide. And I can tell you right now, the fear in people's voices when they weren't able to provide food for their families was absolutely heartbreaking. So we want to make sure that the Pat and Gill House and our Neighbors Table and other organizations like them are suitably funded with the money that they need to provide food to families living in Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury.
All right, thank you, Representative. So there's a saying that is that there's no room for partisanship in our local politics. How do each of you respond to that statement? And if you agree, how will you demonstrate that commitment that there is no room for partisanship? This goes to Representative Kelcourse.
So I have the utmost respect for every individual that I serve with in the legislature. I absolutely think the world of the Speaker of the House. The majority leader of the Democratic Party has been a wonderful friend, and that's attributable to my father, who went to high school with McQuincy High School a long time ago. And Governor Baker, another great individual. I went to the State House to make friends because having come from a background where we were very involved in athletics, a winning team, a successful team is one that works together. And when I go into Boston, I want to make sure that that person I'm sitting next to, or that person in the 1st Division, or the other individual over in the 4th Division, or somebody in the Speaker's office in the State House knows that I'm willing to work with them, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make a difference in my district. I ran as an unenrolled candidate back in 2012. I swore that I was going to be the first person elected to the state legislature. So when I ran for state senator and the results of the election came in as an unenrolled candidate, and I was on the, down on the losing end of that race, it was somebody that came to me who has always been an independent at heart, voted both sides of the aisle, and that's former retired Sheriff Frank Cousins. He told me, he says, Jim, as a Republican in Massachusetts, you can be an independent, and I want you to maintain that independent spirit and that independence of yours, and go into the legislature, become a Republican, work with people, work with the Democratic Party, work with the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and do what's right for your district, and my record reflects that. I've been a strong supporter of women's health care and women's reproductive rights. I was the only Republican that voted for the Health Care Reform Act, the only Republican. And I voted to support the LGBT community and voted for their rights as well. And I've taken a stand, an independent stand, in representing this district, and I'm proud of it.
Thank you. Ms. Hewitt, same question for you on partisanship.
Sure, thank you. So I fundamentally, as an issue advocate, as someone who works on clean energy policy and climate action, it is always my operational mode to put issue before party. So I always prioritize the work before the party. I've had to work that way because I have climate and clean energy related goals in states with Republican governors, and just because I don't identify with them, that doesn't make our goals any less important. So I have had great success working with the Baker administration, which has been in place for most of my career. And I believe that the issues, well, the issues always need to be front and center. We are in a unique case in Massachusetts with more than 80% of our House being Democratic. So I do find concern as a constituent with hearing that our representative became a Republican when someone encouraged him to, but that's such a drastic minority in Massachusetts that by becoming a Republican, you're really just sacrificing a seat at the table with more power and more influence that could be bringing that back to the community. So I don't really understand the logic behind that. Our representative will never be the chair of a committee as a Republican in Massachusetts. That's a strength that the community could have that we are passing up. And finally, I'll just say that in this moment in time, our parties have taken on new meaning. They've taken on a moral reality. And to be associated with the Republican Party today is a statement that I find problematic. But of course, I will always put the work first, and I will work with anyone who is willing to advance the issues.
All right, thank you very much. Along those lines, Representative Kelcourse, a question to you. The Massachusetts Republican Party has stated its support for Donald Trump, but Governor Baker has not. Mm-hmm. Do you stand with Governor Baker or Donald Trump's Republican Party?
So I stand for Jim Kelcourse, and I stand for the people of Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury. And I have worked very, very hard, as I just indicated in my last statement to the audience, to work as an independent, to work and serve the best interests of the people of Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury. This is America. If you don't like Donald Trump, you don't have to vote for Donald Trump. If you like Joe Biden, vote for Joe Biden. And that's what's wonderful about this country. It's a country my mother came to in 1965 in pursuit of the American dream, to live out and enjoy a free life, and to be able to support who you want and love who you want, and raise a family in a free country. So when it comes to the President of the United States, if I ever have the privilege or the honor of dealing with the office of the President of the United States, I would be happy to work with the President of the United States, whether it's Joe Biden, whether it's Donald Trump. If I had the privilege when it was Barack Obama, when I was an Amesbury City Councilor, although I never did get that opportunity, we have a wonderful Constitution in this country. I respect the Constitution. I'm an attorney, and I just really feel that it's everybody's right in this country. Just like it's a woman's right to choose, it's a person's right to vote who they feel the best candidate is, and I support that decision.
Thank you. Ms. Hewitt, would you like to comment about that?
Absolutely. So that wasn't an answer. We just heard from our representative, who is a Republican, despite it not being on any of his campaign material or signage, that essentially who the president is irrelevant to his role as state representative. Who he supports as president is irrelevant to his role as state representative. Well, who wins this presidential election is incredibly relevant to our communities. It is relevant to people with reproductive systems who may be less likely to have the right to make decisions about their own bodies if this president is reelected. It affects people who benefit from the Affordable Care Act and whether they may or may not maintain their benefits. It affects the level of stimulus funding that Massachusetts will receive when we have a $3 to $5 billion budget gap. It affects people not insignificantly who have been living for 4+ years now with serious emotional distress over how the leader of your party and of our country treats women, treats people of color, treats the LGBTQ community, treats immigrants, treats differently abled people and low-income individuals. It affects people who don't want to see dreamers deported or families separated at the border, who care about the future of our democracy, who believe science is real and love is love. So it matters very much here. And I don't believe that we should let our representative off the hook without answering, do you support the reelection of this president, or will you join in the fight for the existence of our democracy and do everything you can to make sure that the primary presidency comes to an end?
Representative, you want 30 seconds to answer?
So I
that?
join in the fight of representing the people in Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury. Let me tell you a quick story.
A 30-second story.
On April 15th, I got a call from a very distraught CEO of Anna Jake's Hospital who said, the Department of Defense seized our COVID-19 test kit allotment today. I don't know where else to turn. This means lives in our hospital. And based on being a good person and building relationships, which you sent me to the State House to do, I was able to reach out to somebody who I made friends with, despite whether I agree with a person or not, or what they say and how they act, might be repulsive to some, but in this instance, we were able to save lives. And that COVID-19 test kit allotment was rerouted back to Anna Jake's Hospital in less than 50 minutes.
Thank you, Representative. Okay. Next question goes to Ms. Hewitt. Since we're talking political parties, the legislature is heavily Democratic. There's no question there. So Democrat Robert DeLeo has been voted basically as Speaker for life. And critics of a Democratic majority in the Massachusetts House, some believe representatives vote in lockstep with whatever legislative Democratic leaders want. Why should voters believe you as a freshman representative? Why would you be any different?
Thank you for this question. Because I'm an advocate and an activist. It has defined my life. It's defined my career. It is my job to challenge leadership, to change the status quo, to speak up when things aren't right. The problems that I see within the Massachusetts legislature and within our laws, I don't blame Republicans exclusively for those. I know that with such a significant majority that a lot of my challenges, a lot of the change that I hope to bring will come with challenging fellow Democrats. And that is a space that I have proven over my 8-year career as an advocate. I'm very comfortable with disagreeing with Democrats. And that is something that I will continue to do in the legislature, specifically regarding transparency. A lot of the Massachusetts State House is one of the least transparent legislatures in the country. We're one of only 4 states in which our legislature exempts itself from public records laws, and we're the only state in which the governor's office, our courts, and our legislature exempts themselves from public records laws. I find that undemocratic. I find that as an advocate, it is impossible to hold elected officials accountable if we don't know how they're voting. And those are rules effectively passed by Democrats, Democratic leadership, and these are rules that I will be seeking to change. And if we can't change them, then I will seek to, I commit to, and actually have a letter in the queue to you at the Daily News with my commitments on this front to lead by example and act in a way that I believe should be required to act. One specific example is that our House in Massachusetts doesn't publish any of the votes that are cast in committees where most important decisions are made about legislation. Those committee votes are kept secret from the public, including those of our own representative. My commitment is to publish every single vote that I cast in committee, despite the fact that it is not required.
Okay, thank you. Representative Kelcourse, do you want to address the question of Robert DeLeo as the speaker and folks in the other party voting in lockstep? Is that a problem? Is that something that you would like to see change?
Well, I tell people this. I say, look, especially during the pandemic, some folks have called me with some concern about the way the state government is run and said, you know, there needs to be change. And I said, well, remember how you feel when you go to the ballot box on November 3rd. Balance is good. Whether you agree with the president or you don't agree with the governor or you like the speaker or don't like the speaker, it's good to have balance. Lopsided in one direction is never a good thing. So having too many of one party, and look, and this is me saying that I'm friends with a lot of these folks in there. And again, this is how we're able to get things done, like big earmarks to clean up microfab over in Amesbury to the tune of $1.5 million in bond bills. That's approved by the Speaker of the House. It goes through his office, and that's based on a really good relationship that I have with the leadership. Do improvements need to be made? Of course. Do improvements need to be made at the presidential level? Absolutely. Okay. We all stand to improve, including myself. None of us are perfect. But to do so by, tossing insults at each other is not a good thing. I have a good friend who I served with on the Amesbury City Council. His name is Bob Lavoie. I look up to him. He's been a great teacher. He's been a great mentor. He said it's okay to disagree, just as long as you're not disagreeable while doing so. Change is absolutely good. We all look forward to change. Some things in life, become healthier, become stronger, you become better as a result of the change that happens. And transparency is always a good thing. So I think moving towards a more transparent legislature is absolutely a step in the right direction. And it's one of the reasons why I post everything that I'm doing as your state representative and have for the last 6 years on social media.
Thank you, Mr. Kelcourse. Since you mentioned microfab, it got me thinking about the environment. Mm-hmm. Climate change. Climate change has caused extreme weather events in our region and much of the country. Rising oceans here. How do we protect First Essex neighborhoods and waterfront areas against flooding, beach erosion, and other threats to life and property? By
re-electing me your state representative on Tuesday, November 3rd. I was able to successfully get $1 million to the city of Newburyport to help shore up its water treatment facility that's located on the banks of the Merrimack River. As you know, I kayaked 117 miles of the Merrimack River over 4 days last summer to raise the awareness of the environmental importance of that Merrimack River to the region. We depend on it economically. A lot of jobs are created, a lot of marinas, the boat business, the recreation industry is thriving because of the Merrimack River that we have here running through our district, and our beach community. So we need to protect that environment. We need to protect Plum Island. There's a lot of moving parts there with respect to Plum Island. It's great to see that we're moving forward on shoring up that reservation terrace area with some sandbags to get us through the winter months. But we need to continue to work on getting permits to dredge the channel, to make sure that sand is redeposited. And that's going to take money. And again, that's going to take relationships. A lot of that money is in the form of a bond bill. So the environmental bond bill that comes up, the economic development bond bill that comes up, based on having a great relationship with the Speaker of the House and the leadership within the Democratic Party, I'm able to get those important earmarks for the district to protect against storm surge. That was something that I was able to get in the last legislative cycle in the environmental bond bill. Bond bills that I voted, 3 of which that I voted in favor of, all of which, every 2 years we have a bond bill, or we have an environmental bill that comes up. So protecting against the environment, rising sea levels, bringing money back to the district to help shore up those areas of our seacoast is, I think, what's going to be very important moving forward. And based on my relationship with Governor Baker, remember, the bond bill is a 2-step process. You get the money in the bond bill, but you got to get it released. And the governor is the one who authorizes the release of the bond bill money, just like the money that was released for the parking garage here in the city of Newburyport, $5 million.
Thank you, Representative. Same question to you, Amber Hewett. How do you protect First Essex neighborhoods and waterfront areas against flooding and beach erosion and other threats from climate change?
Thank you. So, learning about climate change at 15 years old is the reason that I'm here with you all today at 30. It is the greatest, most existential threat of our time, and the greatest scientists in the world tell us that we have about a decade to solve this crisis. I know it may seem strange to some watching to put such emphasis on a global threat like climate change while I'm running for a state representative of 2 cities and a town, but I believe firmly in taking seriously our piece of the puzzle, in leading by example. And frankly, I'm running for office because while I have worked with environmental champions in the Massachusetts State House, there's a devastating lack of urgency around this issue on Beacon Hill. And an issue that has young people, children, marching in the streets scared for their future while their fears, again, are validated by the world's best scientists. We've got to rise to this challenge. And of course, it has local implications on our very own beaches and beachfront property. So my proposals, everything that I will advocate for, and these are day one things. This is what I work on now and what I will work on next year. We need to set a goal of 100% renewable energy by 2035 and have a roadmap toward meeting it. We need to advance the large-scale development of offshore wind power, remove the cap on net metering so that we can incentivize more solar development. We need to change our building code so that communities can opt for net zero building standards for new construction. We need to electrify and expand public transit. We need to prioritize environmental justice. And while the representative talked about the funds needed to support communities like Reservation Terrace, I was thrilled to see that Congressman Moulton did secure in this year's reauthorization of the Water Resources Development Act, almost $7 billion for the dredging of small harbors, specifically calling out the importance of Newburyport. So it does look like 10 years after the river was most recently dredged, we will be getting that kind of significant dredging and longer term solution than the sand sacks that were, super sacks that were covered in today's Daily News. Great to have the shorter term solution, but the long term one, it looks like, is on the way.
All right, thank you. Just talk about the Merrimack River for a minute here. We had, 2 years ago, a lot of people didn't know what a CSO was, a combined sewage overflow, and I think there's been a lot of publicity and a lot of attention in the media and also obviously in the legislature. People are paying attention. Now we have notification set up. There's a task force looking at how to maybe get a long-term plan for what will be a very expensive issue to solve. If you were elected, Ms. Hewitt, what would be the next step you would push to take to address the sewage overflows in the Merrimack?
Great, thank you. Well, I will say with humility that I will be joining an ongoing conversation of leaders. This, of course, is an issue that crosses district lines, it crosses state lines, it crosses public and private lines, and it is a need for real collaboration and visionary leadership, cohesiveness from one meeting to a next where we're advancing solutions. I do commend those who have helped to advance, including our representative, the notification system and also the Rotaries of Amesbury and Newburyport for raising money for an app. Getting that information to residents is, of course, first and foremost. But just knowing that the river is highly polluted to a dangerous level doesn't help those who want to recreate on the river, and it doesn't help those who make their living on the river. So we need to focus on prevention, and this really does come from a significant need for collaboration to secure funding, both federally and at the state level. We need to advance conversations to a point where we are pulling in both our leaders in New Hampshire and Massachusetts to just address the infrastructure improvements that ultimately need to be made to stop this. The problem will only worsen as climate change increases rainfall and storm surge and sea level rise, bringing more of these events that bring about combined sewage overflows. And I will also say, for far too long, Massachusetts has underfunded environmental agencies, which makes it really hard to hold polluters accountable, and it makes it really hard to inform people on what they can do to protect themselves and their families and to advance the solution. I mean, if we don't have information on what's in the river, how can we make a strong case for solutions? So all environmental agencies in Massachusetts received 0.6% of the entire state budget. I have for a long time and will continue to advocate on the inside for increasing that to a whopping 1%.
All right, thank you. Representative Kelcourse, same question. Beyond notification about CSOs.
We need to end CSOs. I grew up on the river, so I'm 46 years old. My family moved up here from the South Shore. My dad took a job on the Merrimack River. We had a family business there up until last October. So I saw firsthand what it was like to grow up with a really dirty river for most of my life. So the river has cleaned up significantly. Are we at the point where we need to be right now? No. And it's why I filed the CSO bill. There were a number of CSO bills filed, as folks are aware. And the first step was passing notification to let folks know downstream when there was going to be an overflow. One of the things I did is I took a step further. I flew down to Washington, D.C. on 2 occasions. I met with the Environmental Protection Agency, made some great friends down there. The EPA agreed to modify the permits so that they were reissuing to a couple of the upstream communities, Haverhill and Lawrence, to notify people sooner when there was going to be a spill. So federally, they took some action sooner than we did in the House of Representatives at the state level. But what I also did is I joined a group of individuals. There were 3 of us legislators, myself, Representative Christina Minicucci, Senator Diana DiZoglio, and President of the Northern Essex Community College, Lane Glenn, and some others. And we kayaked down the Merrimack River, all 117 miles, over the course of 4 days, from Franklin, New Hampshire, to Plum Island, Massachusetts, to raise awareness of what this river really means to the region. And what we need to do is we need to put an investment in the infrastructure in the oldest part of the country, and that's New England, to end CSOs altogether. It was refreshing to hear from Manchester and Concord their commitment to, and their commitment already to ending CSOs and to upgrading that infrastructure. But we need to do the same here in Mass, and we need the funding to be able to do that. We need to work with our federal partners to be able to do that.
All right, thank you, Representative. I want to move on to some other topics here. This is only an hour-long forum. Question for Amber Hewett about housing. Under the housing category, I'm going to switch over to you.
Oh, okay.
Under the housing category on your website, you list ensuring seniors can afford to stay in their communities as one of your priorities. Specifically, what is your action plan to ensure that senior citizens can afford to stay in their communities, and what are the financial costs of your plan?
Sure. Well, this is a personal topic for me. I'm the 4th generation of my family to call this district home, and my grandparents were able to live out the ends of their lives here, and I can't imagine them needing to relocate because the cost of downsizing or the cost of staying in this community on Social Security is too much. I live across the street from the Sullivan Building downtown Newburyport, and I talk to a lot of my neighbors and see the challenges that our seniors are living in, the lack of support that they have, and it's shameful. These are our elders. These are people who have given their lives to our communities, raised their families here, and they deserve the very best. And of course, this is a highly relevant topic here in this district. We have a lot of seniors, and we need to do what we can to protect them. So part of this really ties in, I think, to the affordable housing priorities as a whole, that we need to make more affordable housing available and prioritize its availability for seniors. So we need to work with local leaders to incentivize the increase in rental units in the district. We also need to change zoning laws to make it easier to develop more affordable housing and smart growth. We need to create affordable housing that works for seniors, where they have access to meaningful, effective, efficient public transit and are able to get around the community and have access to opportunity, get over here to the senior center. And I also mentioned earlier needing to just consider rent stabilization and lifting that ban that Massachusetts set, because we can't be pricing our seniors out of this community. And I also do support the programs to have property tax deferrals for seniors and working with local partners on making that work.
Okay, for Representative Kelcourse, what bills have you supported that ensure seniors can afford to stay in their communities?
So one of the things that we did is we talked with the administration about advancing housing stock in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that's one of the initiatives that we were working on with the administration to make sure that there were housing choices available for people. What happened, as we all know, is COVID-19 affected this whole area, and we turned our attention onto making sure that businesses were able to stay afloat, that people were able to stay in their homes with eviction moratoriums, that we worked with banks and other lenders to make sure that foreclosures weren't going to happen, and that the elderly were safe in their homes without the threat of losing their home. Prior to becoming a legislator, I worked as a self-employed attorney. Now in my life as a legislator and giving this job 110% of my time, all the time for the last 6 years, I haven't been doing the form of pro bono work that I was doing prior to becoming a state representative. I consider my pro bono work right now using my legal experience to help make sure that the elderly get the housing that they need, that they get the food that they need, that people who are really in need get what they deserve so they can stay here in their community. But one of the most frustrating things that I experienced prior to becoming the state representative in 2015 was hearing from somebody who wasn't able to pay for their oil bill and wasn't able to make their rent payment. So I've worked closely with the legislature and with the administration on ways in which to advance the interest of keeping costs low here. And one of the things that we did, it's not enough, is we were able to provide seniors with the ability to do tax credits in the exchange for work at places like Town Hall. There's senior circuit breaker tax credits that are available for them. So those are the types of legislation that we've been advancing and pushing, but still more needs to be done, especially during this very challenging time that we're in.
All right, thank you. Another question to you, Mr. Kelcourse. What is your position on the safety of the Seabrook nuclear power plant and your plans for monitoring and protecting neighboring communities? So
that's really important, and it was a resolution that I was happy to sign on behalf of the C10 organization and the citizens within the other members and affiliates of the citizens within a 10-mile radius of the Seabrook nuclear power plant. I know that there were a lot of questions about the cracks in the foundation, and that we worked really, really hard, and I joined a group of those concerned to make sure that those concerns were addressed before the relicensing happened. But the NRC was very available as far as I'm concerned. They made some meetings available to us. We were up at the Best Western in Seabrook. We traveled across state lines to go there and attend. We want to make sure that the safety and the health of the people living in this district are addressed, and that those concerns are met, and that there are no safety issues when it comes to the Seabrook nuclear power plant. I know that's a hotly contested issue. We want to make sure that we have safe, reliable power. So things like wind energy and solar energy, hydro energy, bills that I voted for in the legislature and supported, earmarks in those same pieces of legislation that I fought hard to get to protect against storm surge and to protect our water treatment facilities here in Newburyport, in Amesbury, and the system that we have over in Salisbury have been and will be, and very, very important to me. But we want to make sure that those concerns expressed by a lot of valid concerns by people of the district about Seabrook and its safety are met, and that we continue to run a safe plant.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Hewitt, same question to you. What's your position on the safety of Seabrook and plans for monitoring and protecting communities?
Right, so cracks in the foundation of a nuclear facility are a pretty terrifying concept. And I've heard about this topic actually far more than I expected to from people who live in serious fear in this community, that the upkeep is not happening, that this is an old plant who got their contract extended, and I was among those who were really disappointed to see that extension. One of the first things I did on this campaign was go to meet with Natalie at C10 and learn about the monitoring that's taking place out of this district, the state funding that she receives, and make sure that I am equipped and ready to support the work of that organization that we're really fortunate to have here in the community. So I envision that to be a really close partnership, and that if we get to the point of needing to really sound alarms, that I will be at the front of the line sounding that alarm and advocating for change or retirement of the plant. We don't need nuclear energy in this region anymore. We have the clean energy solutions that we need without needing to continue to generate power that creates a waste product that we have nothing to do with. We live on this precious, finite planet, and we have all of the resources at our disposal to live much lighter on it, to generate our power and maintain our lives and run our economies in a way that doesn't do damage with its waste products, and then also leave our communities living in fear of what could come our way. And I know the plant, I don't want to be fear-mongering here. I know that we're not in any imminent danger, but we also all know stories of crises that no one anticipated, and we do live with that risk in our communities by being in such close proximity to a nuclear facility.
All right, thank you. Switching topics here again, we have a few more minutes. The subject of recent protests and Black Lives Matter movement, do you believe in, Ms. Hewitt, do you believe in the freedom of all Americans and all those in our district to peacefully protest and respectfully fight for equality for all citizens?
Absolutely, wholeheartedly. I've been at as many of the protests as I could make it to, and have been protesting since I was in a stroller. So it is in my blood to speak up when something isn't right, and how the systemic racism in our nation, in our state, and in our district is not right. I have been incredibly inspired by the persistence of peaceful protest in this community. In the aftermath of the murders of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, our community rose up with the nation and hasn't quieted down, spending a lot of time walking the streets of this district, and have been uplifted by the statements of solidarity that line every one of our streets. This community cares deeply about this and is saying that we want action. So absolutely, I want to be very clear that not taking action on this front, that neutrality on dismantling the racist laws and institutions that exist in Massachusetts, is upholding systemic racism. So it is very important that anyone that we elect right now, while our communities are awoken to this issue that we should have been awoken to a long time ago, have a plan of the ways that they are going to be advocates on this front and represent the activism that exists in our community. So I will be an active ally wholeheartedly to Black organizers and leaders who have been calling for the changes that are being called for forever. The Black and Latino Caucus was ready with a roadmap for police reform because they had already been asking for all of these things for years, and we're taking this moment of opportunity with so much attention to make change. So I will be side by side, shoulder to shoulder with our leaders on Beacon Hill and our organizers around the Commonwealth to do the things they're advocating for. Invest in the safety and resiliency of communities, increase accountability for civil rights violations, and prioritize environmental justice to correct for and repair for the systemically racist decisions of our energy and infrastructure, past and present.
Thank you. Mr. Kelcourse, same question to you. Do you believe in the freedom of all Americans to peacefully protest and respectfully fight for equality for all citizens? And perhaps you'll address some of what Ms. Hewitt was talking about.
I do, and that's what makes this country great. Again, it's the place that my mother came to, that my grandmother came to. Those before me and my family sought, a better life in the United States of America. As an attorney, as somebody who really values the Constitution of the United States and respects all amendments of the United States Constitution, I'm a big believer and a proud supporter of those who want to peaceably protest and make a change here in the United States of America. However, one group that I am going to stand behind and always will stand behind is our men and women in blue, the police officers who protect us. I went over to a Black Lives Matter protest in Amesbury, and it was a nice protest. And I walked the crowd and I spoke to individuals, and it was a wonderful day and a great afternoon. And it was really good to see a big turnout there. When I walked down the street, there was a woman who approached me and she says, "Representative, can you tell me where there's a police officer? Because the men over there, they look like they don't belong here and they look like they might start trouble." It's okay to criticize the police. There are things like licensing and certification that are good, banning of chokeholds. We're all for that. But when we need those men and women the most, we need to respect them. We need to honor them. We need to know that they're putting their lives in danger, and there are times when they might not come home after a shift. I had a cousin of mine that served in the military. He put his country first, and about 2 years ago, he passed away. But all he wanted to do is he wanted to serve his country. All these policemen and women want to do is they want to protect, they want to take care of, they want to serve the communities in which they work in. Are improvements necessary to be made? Absolutely. We need to make sure that we have the right men and women in there, and that's where the certification comes in. And that's where I look forward to continuing to work with the chiefs of police here in Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury, who have endorsed my candidacy for re-election.
I think we have time for just a couple more questions, and they're going to be very specific, and then you will each get to ask a question of the other candidate. Representative Kelcourse, you sponsored a home rule petition for Newburyport to dissolve the redevelopment authority and turn its property over to the city. It took more than, I think, 10 months for that home rule petition to be voted by the legislature. Why did it take that long when home rule petitions are normally a very routine legislative matter?
Because there's a process that every bill has to go through. So Mayor Holliday asked me if I would file the bill, and I said I would. I'd be happy to do it and work with the mayor. We have a lot of great local leaders here, and it's really, truly a privilege to work with them. So we filed the bill, and really one of the things that held the bill up is, the bills in the committee, and the chairman of the bills in the committee in third reading wanted to come up here, Democratic chair of the bills in the committee on the third reading wanted to come up here, Representative Ted Speliotis, and actually take a look at all the parcels of land that were involved. This wasn't a simple bill to just put through. There were a lot of different moving parts. There were a lot of different parcels of land, and legally they had to make sure that this bill, they were crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. It's one thing, and then there was one case, I have the case off the top of the town of Smithfield, I think it was, here in Massachusetts, that the chairman said we had to abide by. It was a Supreme Judicial Court decision. So we had to take extra special care in making sure that everything was done. So 10 months, in my opinion, we were able to accomplish the passage of that bill with all the things that were happening. I think is pretty impressive with a Republican state rep and a Democratic chair of a committee and a Democratic-controlled House. Just goes to show you that I've made some really good relationships and that those individuals trust me and they trust my judgment. And being an attorney, too, I'm able to work with them on the challenges that, those types of bills might, pose, and work those out and get it passed for the governor's signature.
All right, thank you. Ms. Hewitt, one other question here that refers again to your website, your campaign website. You, under children and families on your website, you say you want to expand pre-K and universal child care. Why do you feel that child care should be universally paid for as an expected responsibility of taxpayers?
Thank you. I love this question. So the Massachusetts State House is currently over 70% men. It's only 29% women. And that's disappointing to me because it's unequal representation, but that's problematic because it materializes in policy. Equal representation is important because people who with lived experience understand the importance of prioritizing different things. As a nation, we have not prioritized childcare largely because we've kept women home, earning 79 cents on the dollar, so their careers are less valuable, and have been represented by people who do not fully understand the scale of importance of this and what it does to women across our society. As a young woman, my friends and I talk all the time about how to balance the concept of having a family ever with our career ambitions because of the incredibly high cost of childcare and how to make that work financially. Too many people are putting their career plans on hold, and this disproportionately falls on women because of the cost of childcare and the need to subvert that expense in a family until kindergarten becomes available for a half day, and then you finally have full day care for your child in first grade. So this is something that it needs to be prioritized to levelize opportunity in our society. It needs to be prioritized so that families, so that single mothers have an option of what to do with their child while they need to go to work to pay to feed their child. It is actually shameful that we don't do this. It doesn't really make sense in terms of how our society runs and the cost of living and the need to largely bring two families' income to support the high cost of housing, et cetera, in our society. So,
all right, thank you very much. Ms. Hewitt, you now can ask a question to Representative Kelcourse, who gets 2 minutes to respond.
Okay. Well, okay. I was going to ask you, Representative, and I guess I still will since we didn't get an answer earlier. I really emphasized from my heart how much it matters who wins this presidential election. So I want to hear an answer from you. I'm your constituent, and I want to hear a transparent answer from you, whether you will denounce this president or whether you will do what you can to end this nightmare of a presidency. Or support him. Sorry, I gave you, hopefully that's your option. And frankly, I'm not trying to put you into a corner.
No, that's all
I
right.
genuinely hope that this is something that we agree on because our society, our district really depends on it for all of the reasons that I mentioned earlier. So do you support this president's reelection, or will you denounce the lack of leadership we've had for 4 years?
So again, this is America. We don't denounce, we don't discriminate, we don't judge.
But that's
Do I
what he
agree with
does.
everybody? I don't always agree with everybody. I'm not perfect myself. But I can tell you this. I was going to finish something, but I only had 30 seconds before. On April 15th, I got a call from the CEO of Vanna Jake's Hospital. And he asked me, I need your help. I desperately need your help. I've got Gary Lee, our clinical director of operations, on the phone here from the hospital. And our COVID-19 test kit allotment, it was seized today by the Department of Defense. And we just had an OB nurse who showed symptoms of COVID-19. If we don't have this particular test kit, that we can get a result within under an hour, we have to send it to the lab in Boston. It could take several days. And in the meantime, we have to quarantine everybody that came into contact with this individual. So this test kit that they only had very few left of was able to give a negative result to this nurse. And he says, we're out of these test kits. Department of Defense has rerouted this allotment of test kits to another area of the country. If I spent my time in office picking on the Speaker of the House, picking on what I don't like about Governor Baker, and picking on and denouncing President Trump instead of making friends, not enemies, I wouldn't be representing the people of Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury to the best of my ability and skill. I have a copy of the email right here that Mark Goldstein sent me the following day when he said, "Representative, thank you very much. What you did saved lives." He says, under an hour, we got a call from Washington, D.C., and they told us and gave us a routing number that our COVID-19 test kit allotment that was otherwise rerouted to another area of the country will be in Newburyport and Anna Jakes tomorrow, saving lives, quote, saving lives. That story made a big difference to me, because if my mother or father was in Anna Jakes Hospital, or Miss Hewitt's family members or loved ones, or any of your loved ones were in Anna Jakes Hospital, and they didn't have that necessary COVID-19 test kit, then you know what? And I spent my time denouncing people, I wouldn't be doing my job for Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury.
Thank you very much.
That's important and admirable, but it's not an answer to my question.
So thank you very much. That was his 2 minutes. And now, Representative, you get to ask a question to Ms. Hewitt.
I just want to thank Ms. Hewitt for the opportunity to be here this evening. I want to thank her family and wish them all very well. And I want to thank the people of Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury.
This is a question, not a
I don't have a
closing.
question.
Okay.
I just want to thank her for the opportunity to be here this evening. Thank you very much, and I wish her the very best of luck.
Okay.
Thank you.
So now we come to the closing, 2 minutes each. And I do want to point out that many of these questions came from readers and folks in the communities who we solicited their ideas and their questions, and we got a real assortment. And I think it was an interesting assortment. So our closings, reverse order of the beginning. So we start with James Kelcourse.
Well, I first want to start again by thanking Ms. Hewitt for the opportunity in coming here this evening for this important forum. I want to thank you, Mr. Lodge, and the Newburyport Daily News for your commitment to the community and making this time available for the people of Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury. I want to especially thank the people of Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury for their confidence, but more so their trust in me for being your state representative for the past 6 years. When I first came into office, we were buried under 10 feet of snow. I worked with the administration to make sure that we had necessary equipment coming in here from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation and the state of New York to make sure that homeowners on Plum Island could safely get on and off the island. We worked to get school funding restored to the budget. In 5 years, what otherwise hadn't happened in 27 years, we were able to get special education transportation language. I want to thank a very special individual by the name of Les Murray, former Amesbury High School principal, who said that, Jim, you're onto something with this and keep pushing forward. And we got it done, Les. Thank you very much. I want to thank all of the business people. I want to thank the people of this community who have put up with the challenge of COVID-19, who have put their trust in me, who have spent many early mornings, afternoons, and working through the frustrations in the evenings of, the challenge of unemployment and not being able to get their necessary benefits, and working with me and entrusting in me the ability to deliver for them. The leaders of the three communities, you have been absolutely terrific. You keep me on my toes and you keep me informed of what the communities of Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury need the most. We're going to continue to work together. We're going to continue to fight hard. We're going to continue to keep that Merrimack River clean, that river that I love. I want to thank Lane Glenn for the opportunity to join him on that trip, and my fellow legislators for their friendship and working with me to make sure we always do what's right for the 1st Essex District. Thank you, and I look forward to your vote on Tuesday, November 3rd for re-election.
Thank you, sir. So a 2-minute closing to Amber Hewett.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Richard, and thank you, Representative. Thank you, Theo. Thank you, everyone who's here and everyone who's watching. It really is an honor and a memorable moment in my life to be going through this with all of you. So I started this evening by mentioning the 3 pillars of this job: constituent services, bringing resources back to the district, and policy leadership. And that I think that we are lacking fulfilling our potential on that third pillar. We heard a lot from Representative Kelcourse this evening about what he does and what he's doing on constituent services. I will take constituent services very, very seriously, and I will give you all my cell phone number. We heard a lot about what he's doing with regard to bringing resources back to the district. Every representative brings resources back to the district. It is an incredibly important part of the job and one that I will take very seriously. We didn't hear much from him about policy leadership, about the visionary change that he wants to be a part of bringing about in this really troubled moment. Things are not okay right now. We don't have an audience here. We don't know if we have stimulus money coming to Massachusetts because our president is holding up political vindictive lines in the sand of who gets support in the time of a global pandemic. So this matters a lot to me. This means the world to me. My family has lived in this community for 4 generations. And my grandfather was the first building inspector in Newburyport. He was the building inspector at a time when the city faced some really difficult decisions and fierce debate over whether to bulldoze the city and start over, or to restore our history, repair our uniqueness, and build a future that would never let us forget our past. That speaking up left with me an ethic. I get to walk out of my apartment every day and appreciate my grandfather and those who spoke up with him in that time. It left with me an ethic of always speaking up when something doesn't sit well with you. And that's why I'm an advocate now and an activist always. And there's a lot that we covered tonight and a lot that we didn't that does not sit well with me. And I know it doesn't sit well with you at home because we've been talking about it for a year now on the campaign trail and with many of you for years and decades before this. So what I ask of you is that you will believe in what we can achieve together and that we can gather the strengths and struggles of this district and work toward building the future that we know to be within reach. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I tried to keep it close to the 2 minutes. So I want to thank both of the candidates tonight, Amber Hewett, Democrat running for the 1st Essex District Representative seat, and the incumbent State Representative James Kelcourse. And I wish you both well. I want to thank the City of Newburyport and for letting us use this great hall, and also the 3 community access cable TV stations for airing this for everybody to see. I want to remind you there are several ways to vote this year, by mail-in ballot, early voting, and also on Tuesday, November 3rd. That's Election Day, and I hope everybody turns out for it. I also want to remind you and ask you to wear your mask, and be safe and be healthy. Thank you very much.